Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Today, we will discuss the EU AI Act and what it means for you right now. Ahead of this session, we run a poll on LinkedIn, as we did for our last webinar, and we asked who should be responsible for ensuring AI is used ethically and legally in companies. Exactly half of you said certified AI managers or leads are responsible, and the other half said everyone working with AI tools are responsible. And it shows that split says a lot. And it shows we are still figuring out where responsibility lies, and that's exactly what today's session will address. Because under the EU AI Act, responsibility isn't optional. Whether you build, buy, or use AI, there are legal expectations and consequences. So who needs to act? What documentation is required? Do your employees need training? And what are the blind spots that even non-technical teams are missing? In the next approximately 25-30 minutes, we will give you a clear, practical overview of what you need to know to stay compliant and competitive. Now, I'm happy to hand it over to our speaker, Daniel, an expert in AI governance and our guide for today's session. Okay.
Hi.
Hello, Daniel. Welcome on board.
Hi.
How are you?
Fine. Thank you. Looking forward to this webinar.
Okay, cool. You can start when you are ready.
Yeah, thank you. Here the slides. Perfect. So welcome everyone. EU AI Act is the topic that we would like to discuss with you a bit today because, well, many people and organizations these days have to ask the question, am I affected by the EU AI Act? And what's the impact it will have on my business for the next few years? And well, we will discuss that. Just a few words about myself and why I'm talking about this. I'm Daniel, and the last few years I spent all my business time, let's say, showing organizations from many different industries or domains how to effectively use AI, what's the business concept, or the business model, the business cases behind that, and how they can easily scale AI adoption using digital twins. I did this as a researcher at 𝗤𝗵𝘁𝗂𝗹𝗆 University, where I recently finished my PhD, but also now as a full-time consultant and trainer for TwinTech. Here's some companies that I'm currently working together with, but let's jump right into the topic of artificial intelligence today. And well, when I'm thinking of AI, the first picture that usually comes into my mind is, well, what you can see on the slide. Knight Rider, a fancy, innovative car with cool features that fights crimes, even though it's a machine. It can do a lot of cool things, like, well, fighting crime on the one side, but on the other side, of course, if you look into movie history, there are also many other examples of how AI is depicted. As an Austrian, for me, the most famous example, of course, is Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator, but we also have iRobot or 1984, where usually this AI is often depicted as this big brother that gets out of control and tries to take over or control humankind. And even though, of course, this is fiction, to some extent, AI is about us losing control or giving up some portion of control in order to gain all the innovative advantages of AI. But we don't go into the technical aspects of that today. Just why I'm telling this is that if we ask people across Europe in polls, we see that usually more than 50% of the people are rather on the right side of the slide than on the left side. So they're rather not anxious, but the tendencies that people fear the use of AI are getting out of control instead of focusing on the great stuff that we can do with it. And that's why the EU said we need some way to counteract this. And what they try to do with the EU AI Act is to put a trust label, so this quality, EU quality label of artificial intelligence on AI solutions from the European Union. To say, okay, this is a solution that I can actually trust, and there are mechanisms behind that avoid all the situations that you can see on the right side. And we can do that, but it's not done out of the box. We have to make sure that it happens. And if we put this argument on a bit of a broader scale, we can use this devil's triangle that you can see here of cost, speed, and quality. Usually in project management, you might know that this is the idea is to say you have to pick two of them and you can't have all three. The point I want to make here is, if we look at these three quality criteria or aspects of systems, software systems, then we see Asia and especially China here focusing on the cost aspect. So they try to have cost-effective innovations, be the cheapest on the market. Whereas if we look on to North America, we see that there is a high focus on speed. So let's put a lot of money into being the first one to have the new features, the better AI models, whatever. And what Europe's currently trying to do, they're trying to say, okay, we don't want to be the fastest, we don't want to be the cheapest. Probably we also can't compete against Asia and North America here. What we try to do is we focus on quality. And that's also, I talk to people from Canada and India, for example. If you ask them, what do they associate with the European Union? They say, well, it's quality. They have high quality, sustainable, long-living products. And with the UI Act, what the EU tries to do is also put this quality label on AI solutions from the European Union and say, okay, we in the European Union, first of all, we use AI responsible. But also, if you have a AI product from the European Union, you can, to some extent, trust that it was built on using a certain level of quality. And even though there are a lot of arguments against the UI Act and a lot of discussion around over-regulation, and I agree with a lot of them, and there is still discussion, or there are still things to be figured out about the UI Act, I personally believe that that's the cause behind it is something that it's not just good, but we will actually need as Europe to survive in this new era of AI. But anyways, regardless of whether you agree with me or not, the main question you probably ask is, are you affected by the AI? And for that, I have a few questions to ask to do some sort of self-assessment. And first of all, what you can check is, are you using AI in your internal processes? So do you have, for example, do your employees have a license to ChatGPT to generate email or marketing texts or do some analysis, use RAG, whatever it is? If you use some AI tool in your company, then you're already affected by the UI Act as a deployer. And if you're using AI as part of your product, so that can be you sell an AI product, like an AI model, but it can also be one feature of the product you sell is AI-based, like you have some quality checking or quality assurance mechanism as part of your camera that uses a neural network, then you are also affected by the AI Act as a provider. So either use it internally or use it as part of your product, you are affected, the rules are different. And if you're using generative AI, then there are also specific general purpose AI regulations which you are affected by. And we will talk about all these things in detail, but before, so based on this, probably most of you know that they are affected to some extent. And for that, let's have a look at what it means when you're affected. What's the timeline of the AI? So first of all, it is already published and it went into force last year. Only a few people know that, but also after this EU regulation goes into force, there is some translation period. So it's already effective law, but there is some translation period until penalties are actually issued. And the first transformation period already ended in February this year. So just to put this into perspective, so right now, in May 2025, you already have, if you're using AI, you already have to fulfill the AI literacy obligation and the banning of forbidden AI. if you are not doing this, if you somehow contradicting these laws, then there are already penalties about this. And I think the most common penalty here is the last one, that is quite severe. So it's, you can pay up to 50 million euros or 3% of your annual turnover, depending on what's higher. So for most companies, it's probably the 50 million euros, which you have to pay if you do not, if your company, if, for example, your employees are not trained properly to use AI based on the AI literacy obligation. But there's also good news. The deadline for national regulatory bodies to actually enforce these penalties is in August 2025. So most companies do not have a regular, even though it's already, this law already applies, most companies do not have a regulatory body that enforces these penalties on their organizations. But the deadline for that is August 2025. So by then, there might be someone knocking your door and check whether you, for example, fulfill the AI literacy obligation. Let's look at the further timeline. So that's the main point about the timeline. But of course, from now, there are some specific milestones in the next years. First of all, in May 2025, which is now already, there are guidelines for general purpose AI. They are already developed and still under internal review. As far as I know, they will be published in the next weeks or months, because in August 2025, when the national regulatory bodies are being formed, the rules for general purpose AI will already get into force for both providers of general purpose AI, but also for the users of general purpose AI. And then the main point is from August 2026, most parts of the AI Act will be into force. That means all the parts that you might pay penalties for, not the AI literacy obligation, that's already relevant now, but next year, summer next year, all the other parts will go into force, and you will have to face penalties if you do not comply to them. But it's not just about penalties, of course. There will also be, starting August next year, there will be national AI labs that are especially for small and medium companies, but also for larger organizations. They provide funding and infrastructure to try out AI use cases before, in your specific context, before doing more investments. So there will be national AI labs that have mainly the infrastructure. So you don't have to buy your own AI infrastructures to start with AI, and you will also receive a bit of funding. And then the last part of the AI Act will be the classification of high-risk AI systems. And this will be obligatory in 2 years, so August 2027, because there's a lot to be done here, actually. That's why there is 1 year more time than for the others. So you see, the first parts are already relevant for you today, and there will be more and more things coming the next years based on whether you are a provider and deployer in the EU AI. So let's talk a bit about providers and deployers for a second. Providers are organizations that develop AI systems on their own. So you have your own developers and develop an AI system, but also outsource. So if you pay someone else to develop an AI system for you, and you are the organization that puts this AI system on the market, either on-premise or as a service. So you sell the whole package to someone, or you provide it as a pay-per-use option. If you're the one putting it on the market, then you are the provider of this AI system based on the EU AI Act, and you have to make sure that all the regulations are fulfilled. And that's also the case if you do this free of charge. So even if you don't get money for it, also if you're a non-for-profit organization, you have to make sure that every AI system that is on the market in the European Union must be somehow made sure that it has this EU AI Act quality label on it. And also as a deployer, you are the one using AI under your own authority. So if your employees have access to some AI tools, then you as an organization are deployer and have to make sure, for example, that your employees are properly trained to use these AI tools. Of course, there's an exception for private use. So if you're using AI privately, you're not affected by the AI, but if you use it in a business context. And a small excerpt of the obligations of the AI Act. So as a provider, you have to make the technical documentation of your AI. How did you develop it available? Also make sure that you conform, that you're not violating any copyright laws. And you have to publish the training data of the AI that you're using. And the main point that is relevant for both providers and deployers is AI literacy. So if you are developing an AI system, the people involved in this development, they have to be trained on what AI is, how to use AI. And it's also the same for the people that use AI tools in your system, in your organization. So if you're a deployer, your employees also have to have a certain level of AI literacy. And then as a deployer, you also have some specific rules for the use of high-risk or general-purpose AI systems. But let's first talk about this cross-cutting concern of AI literacy, because it's relevant for both providers and deployers. And as we said before, it's also already into force. So if you're using AI right now, you have to have, or your employees have to have a certain level of AI literacy. And here I just copy-pasted the text, what the EU AI Act actually says on AI literacy. The main points here are, well, it's relevant for both providers and deployers. And if you are an organization of one of these categories, you have to ensure that all your employees have a sufficient level of AI literacy. And that involves technical knowledge. So for the operation of AI systems, that involves technical knowledge. So how AI actually works underneath. And this AI literacy also depends on the technical knowledge you already have. So if someone has a PhD in computer science, artificial intelligence, probably they already have a certain level of technical knowledge. But if they have training, if the main training is in another domain like business administration or law, just to use examples, then they need to still get this to a certain level of technical knowledge. Also the experience, of course, the practical experience they have, but also the context in which the AI system is used. So if you are using AI in manufacturing, then your employees have to be trained on how to use AI in manufacturing, not just AI in general. And all of these points are very generic, let's say, from the AI Act, which is also why it's sometimes criticized, but there are a few more specific points that we can already provide you to fulfill this AI literacy obligation is, on the one side, there are 3 dimensions of AI knowledge mentioned. The one is the technical knowledge, how does AI work under the hood, but also knowledge on the potentials and risks. So what can go wrong if I'm using an AI system compared to a traditional system, and also legal and ethical understanding. So for example, all AI systems use data to some extent. That means you also have to make sure that you're GDPR compliant. What are ethical concerns of bias? So how can AI actually, well, all the things I showed on the first slide, how can we avoid these things? People have to be trained and have the knowledge about that. And there are also some specific standards for that. The AI Act also mentions that it will be standards-based. So standards will play a big role for you as an organization to make sure to prove to the European Union that you are EU-AI compliant. And one standard here is, for example, the AI manager. It's an ISO certificate that you can be issued that shows you are trained properly. So you have to do a bit of training before, and then you can on all these dimensions of AI knowledge, technical stuff, and then you get the certificate that proves you have the technical knowledge, the legal knowledge, the ethical understanding, but also all the knowledge you need to successfully manage your AI project. There's also a domain-specific for software architecture, a domain-specific standard from 𝗟𝗂𝗏, and then another example is the ISO 42001 that certifies organizations that use AI systems or that provide AI systems. So this is one important cross-cutting concern of the AI Act, the AI literacy obligation, kind of a prerequisite for your employees or you as an employee to start with AI. And then if you're providing AI systems, or even if you're using AI systems, the main cornerstone of the EU AI Act is this risk-based classification. That means based on the domain in which you use it, there are different regulations that you have to fulfill. For example, for low-risk AI applications, there are basic requirements you have to fulfill. These are things like generating email. There's not a lot going wrong with that. For high-risk AI applications, for example, classifying applications, whether employees will be taken or not, or something or driving an autonomous car. It's maybe a better example, where lives are at stake. That's a high-risk application where there are obligations for both providers and deployers. And well, they're asked for 2 years to do this because there are a lot of these obligations. And then there are prohibited AI practices, for example, social scoring. These are things that you now already have to pay up to 35 million euros of penalties if you are using an AI system for social scoring. And then there are general purpose AI applications, specific rules for that will be published publicly soon. But we already know that there will be a lot about copyright, so making sure that no copyright is violated, transparency of how your result is created and how the AI model was developed, but also, for example, summary of training data that was used to train the AI. And this is an overview, for example, of the obligations for high-risk AI applications. Again, there are 2 years to do all of this, but you see, as a provider, for example, this means that you need to operate a risk and quality management system. So if something goes wrong, you need to have a system in place, but also a quality management system that makes sure that nothing goes wrong in the first place. And then, for example, for both providers and deployers, you have to have a certain level of human oversight. So make sure that someone checks that your system works as it should and there are no big issues, and then also turn it off if there are issues. There's a famous example from Austria, from a national body that released a chatbot, for example, and they had this human oversight and they had to turn it off after 3 days, I think, because they realized it was not working as expected. It was a many months of project, but well, you need to have in this case, this human oversight worked really well, and they turned it off before more damage was done. And also regarding monitoring and logging, there are many regulations, and for deployers in particular, if you're using an AI system in a high-risk environment, you need to make sure that your people know that they are using AI. That's one of the points. But you see, there are many more points, and the slides will be made available online, so you can go through them in more detail. But instead of going in more details and bore you with all of that, probably during your lunch break, I would like to rather give you some practical advice on what to do with the EU AI Act and how to successfully be compliant in your organization, and also how to successfully implement the AI in your organization. And one of these advices, the first advice, is one-size-fits-all solutions work, but they're very expensive in the context of AI in general, but in particular for the EU AI Act, because in all these things that the context of the AI use is considered. That means, for example, AI literacy, if you want to have one training on AI that every employee in your organization has to go through, then this must cover every possible AI usage, from legal to HR to operations or actually product development. But of course, someone in the legal department is probably not interested or it's expensive to train someone from the legal department in how to do AI in product development, even though they don't need it. So first of all, what you need is a strategy for how to train your employees on AI literacy, but also how to ensure compliance. So a company-wide strategy on how to use artificial intelligence, and also distribute responsibilities for compliance among your employees. And the third point is, you're not the only organization affected by the AI Act. So if you build all this knowledge, how to get compliance yourself, it's also very expensive. And that's why outsourcing makes a lot of sense here, because consultants, trainers work for many different companies, so they can use the synergies between these companies and have the knowledge already available, so that you don't have to train so you don't have to get it yourself and then even update it after the UI Act evolves. And as one of the last points, I know I'm in general very optimistic, but I believe that the AI Act is an opportunity for your organization, because it guides you through the strategic integration of AI into your organization. And as a result, you also get this quality label of the UI Act that should be, which is a quality label, because AI is more than just a ChatGPT license. So it's good to start with the tools, but what you need are the actual use and business cases. And for that, to get this knowledge on what to do beyond just having a ChatGPT license, of course, at Technovi, we also provide an AI training. And we have a 2-day workshop where you get all this technical, ethical, and legal AI literacy, which you anyways need because of the UI Act. And also, you will also, but on top of that, you also get the methods to successfully manage AI projects. So not just have the knowledge how to do it, but actually do it and successfully manage AI projects and strategically integrate it into your organization. And we'll go through many specific AI use cases and how you can adopt them. Now, we're also very proud to offer a 4-day option of this workshop, which covers everything from the 2-day workshop. But as a result, you will also get this ISO certificate of the AI manager. And for that, we'll do a lot of hands-on examples, so that after that, you will be properly equipped to manage AI projects in your organization and strategically integrated based on a lot of practical experience which you can gain in this safe environment. And with that being said, this is all the quick update that we can give you for now on the AI Act. Of course, if you have questions, comments, feel free to post them on LinkedIn, reach out to me, or to go browse through the slides again. Here is the QR code, how you can do that. And also, as a heads up, there will be further webinars from Technovi on AI and also on the EU AI Act. So over the summer, there will be a lot going on. So there will be many updates, especially regarding general purpose AI, and these general purpose AI rules will be published, and we will update you on this in one of the next webinars. So stay tuned, and see you there.
Thank you again. Thank you for all valuable information you shared, Daniel. And thank you, everyone, for participating. And see you next webinar. Bye.
Bye.